This episode of Bullet Heaven was made possible by New Media. In episode 96 of Bullet Heaven HD, we took a look at Reflex, a great doujin shooter from Japanese indie studio Cider Skein, and the second game of the Tale of Altainex trilogy. We came away quite impressed with its tight gameplay, fun shield mechanics, and great production values, but Reflex is only the beginning. With both Kamui and Altainex Second having just been made available on Steam on December 11th, 2014, it's finally time to take a look at the rest of the trilogy.
Released in 2010, Altainex Second is actually the first chapter to the Altainex trilogy. This prequel was developed over 10 years after Kamui, and its 3D polygonal visuals are a drastic step up from the previous Altainex release.
Shifting its gameplay focus, Altainex Second emphasizes use of not only powerful laser attacks and simple homing, but also milestone-style melee attacks. Let's take a closer look. Altainex Second is a very different beast from the other two games in the Altainex trilogy. Since it features a 3D polygon graphics engine rather than parallax 2D sprites, some pretty dramatic camera angles can be had throughout the game. Despite this though, movement still takes place entirely on a specified 2D plane, with typical 8-way movement, even when the camera swings back and travels along Star Fox style.
Your ship has two main modes. Fighter mode emphasizes speed, rapid gunfire, and homing shots, while armor mode specializes in melee attacks and direct laser fire with less overall maneuverability. Each mode auto-activates when either the main shot or melee attack are pressed. The attack inputs are also more complex than Reflex or Kamui as well, and of course, can be mapped to any controller you may be using.
Inputs for rapid gunfire and your sword attack are both present, but subfire of different types can be activated in different ways. While holding the gun button, pressing the melee button will enable a homing shot, which depends on an energy gauge in the bottom left-hand corner. This is useful for taking out enemy waves that you can't reach in time from the other side of the screen.
Meanwhile, pressing both at the same time in armor mode enables the Javelin laser, which is not only ridiculously powerful, but also lasts as long as your energy gauge holds out. However, caution should be used, since the energy gauge also affects the main gun's power. Use the homing or Javelin shots too much and your power will be crippled until it either builds up on its own or you collect chips from felled enemies. Power chips appear by using the standard shot or melee attack to defeat your foes, and can build the energy gauge to a maximum level of 5. These chips can be sucked in so long as the rapid shot is engaged.
There's an awful lot of fire being spat all over the screen in Altainex Second, but your ship has a few layers of defense. Purple bullets can be nullified by the main shot, while all the bullets can be swiped away with a melee attack. Lasers are indestructible though. If a shot sneaks through, the first hit's on the house. Get hit again though, and you're down 1 life, and there's no shield recovery here. Once again, careful power management and attack engagement is critical to success.
The flux in power throughout the gameplay makes Altainex Second fairly tactical and requires some decent thought and planning. It's also really fun as a result. Knowing how and when to use any given technique is critical to success, especially with the sharp rise in difficulty starting in Stage 3 of Altainex Second's 5 stages.
There are a couple of issues though. There were times, especially in the second stage, that the backgrounds would end up killing us because of where they stopped between stage phases. There was literally no way to get around or through the obstruction without biting it. So there will be times when you will end up sacrificing a life for no reason other than poor timing or terrible luck. The hitbox is just a bit on the iffy side as well.
Altainex Second is a proper challenging game to be sure, and practice will be needed to see it to the end on 1 credit. Of course, to complement the decent gameplay, there's also some pretty solid scoring mechanics as well.
In addition to standard kill points, some decent score bonuses can be achieved in a couple of ways. Shooting popcorn enemies within 0.6 seconds between each other will create additional point values all the way up to 25,600 points each, but this chain bonus will be broken if the time between each kill is too great.
The second scoring hook in Altynex Second depends on using melee and javelin laser attacks in conjunction with regular offensive attacks. Shooting popcorn enemies with your standard and homing shots in fighter mode will also build a multiplier in the top left-hand corner of the screen, which falls rapidly if foes are not being dispatched.
This multiplier is applied to enemies that have been destroyed while in armor mode, and their base points will be multiplied by whatever the multiplier is at the top left-hand corner, up to 16 times. Aggressively using the homing shots in conjunction with the rapid shot to keep your chain of multipliers all the way up is the best way to score big quickly.
Destroying any enemy in armor mode will still get you a 2 times multiplier, and this multiplier also applies to bosses as well, so getting up close and personal can result in some awesome bonuses. Bearing these scoring rules in mind will get you the biggest point payout for cracking the Steam leaderboards in Altynex Second, which is sure to add replayability for score chasers.
Altynex Second is quite the departure from the other two games in the Altynex trilogy visually. Rather than 2D sprites and backgrounds, all of Altynex Second is rendered in 3D polygons, making for a pretty cool looking game, but for a game that came out in 2010, it lacks a little polish. It looks good and moves solidly at 60 frames a second, but other studios such as Edelweiss have much more solid engines, and their games end up looking vastly superior as a result.
It's not all bad though. Nothing is lost in the shuffle here, as all of the enemies are more subdued color-wise, while their shots are bright and emphasized throughout the whole game. The backgrounds are also pretty cool, but little things like a super repetitive starfield pattern seems to be a little cheap.
The sound balance is off on the outset as well. The music and sound effects are really loud by default. The configuration menu at the outset allows players to reduce the noise and sound effects to a more comfortable level, which is recommended before starting the game up for the first time if you want to play without a headache. As such, once again, the OST is pretty good, but not especially great. The tunage isn't invasive or bad, it's just hard to think of a standout piece off the top of our heads outside of the first stage.
Thankfully, the sound effects here are really quite good, with none of those typical overused Dojin sound effects that seem to spring up in so many places in the Japanese indie circuit. Basically, they do the job really well, and never have us wincing at their quality.
As always, Ciderscane's UI is pretty good, and despite the game originally being a 4:3 aspect ratio game, 16:9 widescreen options allow for more of Altynex Second stages to be seen, though not traversed.
The addition of Steam achievements also adds some replay to Altynex Second, and obviously, practice will be needed for players to get all of them. So Altynex Second seems to be a pretty solid game overall, but how does it stack up? Let's take a look.
Your ship in Altynex Second will move at kind of a slower rate than others in the Altynex series, but this is intentional.
Alternate attacks make up for the lack of speed, but some of the inputs don't work 100% as we'd like.
Altynex Second can be pretty darn challenging, especially starting at Stage 3.
A lot of practice is going to be needed to get through in 1 credit alone.
At 5 stages, Altynex Second is just a tiny bit shorter than we would have liked.
Steam leaderboards add replayability for score chasers.
Visually, the 3D polygons and visual effects work quite well in Altynex Second.
Some of the background patterns, like the first stage's Starfield, are a little too repetitive.
Everything works out pretty good in terms of sound, but not much of the tunage really stands out.
The sound effects are great though.
Taking the milestone-style melee attacks to the next level with extra fire functions makes Altynex Second feel fresh, with a hint of saminess.
Thankfully, it all works rather well, and the scoring hooks have some great risk-reward to them.
Altynex Second is a nifty prequel that fans of the Altynex series will likely dig, especially with its super upscaled presentation. The gameplay works pretty well despite some minor flaws, and it ends up being great fun as a result. Altynex Second gets a 4.25 out of 5. You can get Altynex Second for $7.99 or as part of the Altynex trilogy for $19.99 over many direct download services, especially Steam, right now.
Sharp rise in difficulty start. What?